The melody drifted through the night like a ghost I had buried with my mother 17 years ago. I stopped breathing, my hand frozen against the cold stone of the balcony, because no one alive should know that song. I am Seraphine, queen of the northern wolves, widow at 22, ruler of a kingdom that watches me with doubt written in every pair of golden eyes. The crown weighs heavy on my brow tonight, heavier still because I know that half the wolves who bow before me would see it taken if they could find a way that did not stain their own hands with blood. 3 moons ago, I stood in white furs and spoke vows to a man I barely knew, a man chosen for me by advisors who saw alliance where I saw only duty. 3 moons ago, I watched King Aldrich's body burn on a pyre while the ashes of our political union scattered in the winter wind. He was not cruel to me. He was not unkind. But he was never mine, and I was never his. And the grief I carry now is not for love lost, but for love never found. The vigil fires burned low in the valley below, orange embers marking the graves of those we lost in the border skirmish last week. 14 wolves who followed orders I gave from the safety of my throne room. 14 families who would never see their sons and daughters return. I had come to the balcony to breathe, to escape the suffocating weight of the council chamber where old men spoke over me as though my crown were merely decorative, as though my voice were simply wind passing through an empty room. But the night had other plans. The voice rose from somewhere beyond the castle walls, deep and rough and achingly tender. A man's voice, carrying words I had not heard since I was 5 years old, curled in my mother's lap while fever burned through my small body. She had sung to me through 3 nights of sickness, her lips pressed against my sweat-damp hair, her tears falling silent as snow onto my cheeks. I remember the warmth of her arms, the lavender scent of her skin, the way her voice cracked on the final verse because she knew, somehow she knew, that she would not be there to sing it again. 3 days after my fever broke, she was dead. A sudden illness, the healers said, a weakness of the heart, and the song died with her, or so I believed. My wolf stirred beneath my skin, restless in a way she had never been before. She pressed against my bones, clawing at my ribs, demanding something I could not name. I gripped the balcony railing until my knuckles went white, and I listened. The lullaby spoke of silver rivers that flowed between the stars and sleeping mountains that dreamed of the wolves who climbed them. It spoke of a love that would find its way home even through death, even through centuries, even through the forgetting that claims all mortal things. My mother had told me she created it herself, wove it from moonlight and memory just for me. A secret threaded between her heart and mine, belonging to no one else in all the world. Yet here it was, pouring from the throat of a stranger in the darkness beyond my walls. I did not think. I did not weigh consequences or calculate risks, or consider what the council would say if they discovered their queen running barefoot into the forest at midnight. I simply moved. The guards called after me as I descended the stairs, their voices sharp with alarm, but I did not stop. My bare feet struck cold stone, then colder earth, and still I ran. The song pulled me forward like a hook buried deep in my chest, and my wolf howled within me. A sound of recognition so profound it shattered something I had kept locked away since childhood. The forest swallowed me whole. Branches caught at my sleeping gown, tore at my unbound hair, scraped thin lines of blood across my arms. But I followed the voice through the darkness until I broke into a clearing bathed in silver moonlight. And there I stopped. He knelt beside a stream, his back to me. Broad shoulders curved inward as though the song cost him something precious to sing. A white wolf lay beside him, massive and scarred, ancient marks crisscrossing his pale fur like a map of old battles. The wolf watched me with amber eyes that glowed like twin flames in the darkness. But he did not growl, did not rise to defend his human. He simply watched, as though he had been waiting. The man's voice faltered on the final note. He turned. I had expected a ghost. I had expected my mother somehow returned from the realm of spirits, or a phantom sent to torment me with memories of everything I had lost. I had not expected him. This man with silver-streaked dark hair and a face carved from grief and granite. He looked at me across the moonlit clearing, and his eyes widened with something that might have been wonder or might have been fear, and his voice died in his throat like a candle flame snuffed by sudden wind. We stood frozen, two strangers who shared something neither could explain. "Who are you?" I whispered, and the words came out broken, fractured like thin ice beneath too much weight. He rose slowly, unfolding to his full height, and I saw then how tall he was, how the moonlight caught the scars that raked across his jaw and disappeared beneath his worn leather tunic. His wolf rose with him, pressing against his thigh, still watching me with those burning amber eyes. "I am no one," he said. "A ghost. A memory the kingdom chose to forget. I have not spoken to another soul in 7 years. I thought perhaps I had finally lost my mind when I saw you standing there." But his voice was the same voice that had sung my mother's lullaby, and my wolf was clawing at my insides, desperate to reach him in a way I did not understand. She had never responded to any wolf like this, not to my father before his death, not to Aldrich during our brief marriage, not to any of the alphas who had sought my favor over the years. "That song," I said, forcing the words past the tightness in my throat. "Where did you learn it?" Something shifted in his expression. Pain, perhaps, or wonder. "I do not know," he answered, and his voice was rough with disuse, with years of silence broken only by songs to the moon. "I have known it my entire life. It lives in me like my own heartbeat, like the rhythm of my blood. I sing it when the loneliness grows too heavy to bear. My mother sang that song to me. She created it. No one else has ever known it." He took a step toward me, and I should have retreated. I was the queen, crown or no crown, gown or armor. He was a stranger in the woods, clearly an exile from the ragged state of his clothing and the wildness in his eyes and the scars that spoke of years surviving alone. But my feet would not move. My wolf would not let them. "Your mother," he repeated softly, tasting the word as though it might unlock some door within him. "What was her name?" "Isolde," I breathed. "Her name was Isolde." The stranger closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they glistened with something that looked like tears. He did not try to hide them. "I knew an Isolde once," he said, "before they cast me out, before they told me I murdered a man I loved like a father. She was kind to me. She believed in my innocence when no one else would speak for me. I remember her eyes, green as spring leaves, and the way she fought for me at my trial, even though it cost her standing in the court." The pieces fell together in my mind, sharp and terrible as broken glass. I had heard stories of the exile, whispered in corners when the elders thought I was too young to understand. A young alpha accused of killing Lord Brennan, my grandmother's most trusted advisor, 20 years ago. Sentenced to banishment rather than death because no one could prove his guilt, only suspect it. He had vanished into the mountains, and the kingdom had chosen to forget his name. "Ronan," I said, and his flinch told me everything I needed to know. "You are Ronan." "I was," he agreed, and his voice held the weight of 2 decades spent alone. "Now I am simply the wolf who sings to the moon because there is no one left to sing to." My mind screamed warnings. Ronan was a convicted traitor. Speaking with him could undermine my already fragile grip on the throne. The council would use any excuse to strip me of power, and consorting with an exile was an excuse carved in gold. But my wolf had gone utterly still inside me, and I recognized that stillness. I had read about it in the old texts, heard it described in the legends my mother whispered to me before sleep. "Mate," my wolf breathed, certain as stone. "He is ours. He has always been ours. No, the fates could not be so cruel as to bind me to a man my kingdom despised. I had already lost one husband to the cold machinery of politics. Now the bond was trying to chain me to an exile accused of murder, a ghost who had nothing to offer but questions and a song that should not exist. You feel it too, Ronan said quietly. And there was no triumph in his voice, only tired acceptance. I see it in your eyes. I felt it the moment you stepped into this clearing. My wolf has been restless for weeks, driving me closer to the castle than I have dared in 2 decades. I thought it was madness. Now I understand why. I cannot, I told him, though the words tasted like ash on my tongue. I am the queen. You are a traitor in the eyes of every wolf who serves me. I am innocent, he said, and there was no anger there, only exhaustion. Only the bone-deep weariness of a man who had spent 20 years proclaiming a truth no one believed. I did not kill Brennan. He was my mentor, my guardian, the only father I ever knew. He found me as an orphaned pup starving in the winter woods and raised me as his own. I would have died for him. I would have torn out my own heart before I allowed harm to touch him. Then who killed him? Ronan shook his head slowly. I do not know. I have spent 20 years trying to uncover the truth, but the trail went cold long ago. All I know is that someone wanted Brennan dead and wanted me destroyed in the process. Someone powerful enough to manipulate evidence, to silence witnesses, to ensure that a 17-year-old boy would be cast out before he could speak in his own defense. I thought of my council, of the old wolves who had served my father and my husband, and who now looked at me with barely concealed contempt. I thought of Lord Varen, the eldest among them, who had been Brennan's rival for my grandmother's favor, who had ascended to unprecedented power in the vacuum Brennan's death created. The song, I said slowly. How do you know my mother's song if she created it for me alone? Ronan's brow furrowed. I told you. I have always known it. It came to me in dreams when I was small, before Brennan ever found me. He used to say I hummed it in my sleep, that it was the first sign I was not merely a wild pup, but a soul worth saving. My mother died when I was 5. She told me she created that song herself, that it was ours alone, that no one would ever know it but the 2 of us. But you would have been 7 when she passed, already singing it in your dreams. The implication hung between us, heavy and strange. Either my mother had lied to a dying child, or there was a connection between Ronan and me that predated our births. A thread woven by fate, or by blood, or by something even older than both. Ronan stepped closer, and this time I let him. His scent washed over me, pine and wood smoke and cold mountain streams, and my wolf purred with a contentment I had never felt in my entire life. I should have been afraid. Instead, I felt like I had finally stopped running from something that had been chasing me since the moment my mother closed her eyes forever. I need to know the truth, I told him. About Brennan, about my mother, about why we share a song that should not exist outside of dreams. Then let me help you find it, he said. And his voice was steady now, firm with purpose he had not felt in years. I have nothing left to lose, and you have everything to gain. If I can prove my innocence, perhaps I can also uncover whatever secret binds our souls together. It was madness. It was treason. It was the most reckless decision I had ever made. But I looked into his amber eyes, and I saw not a murderer, but a man who had been broken by the same forces that now sought to break me. A man whose wolf called to mine across 2 decades of enforced separation. Meet me here tomorrow night, I said. Tell no one. We begin then. The nights that followed blurred together, each one a thread in a tapestry of secrets and revelations. I sat through council meetings with my face carefully blank while Lord Varen droned about border security and trade agreements, and I watched his weathered features for any sign of the monster I suspected lurked beneath his practiced civility. He was old now, nearly 70, but his eyes remained sharp as winter ice. He had opposed my coronation, arguing that a widow queen could not hold the throne without a king to steady her trembling hand. He had proposed his own grandson as a suitable match, a boy barely 18 whose greatest accomplishment was the purity of his bloodline. I had refused, and Varen had smiled and bowed and retreated to the shadows. But I saw the hunger burning in his gaze when he thought I was not watching. I saw the patience of a predator waiting for his moment to strike. Each night, I slipped through the forest to meet Ronan in our clearing by the stream. He brought fragments of memory, pieces of a puzzle he had gathered over 2 decades of exile. Brennan was investigating something before his death, he told me, his voice low and urgent in the darkness. Something that frightened powerful people. He spoke to me once of corruption festering in the council, of alliances that served personal wealth rather than the kingdom's welfare. 3 days later, he was dead with my knife in his chest, and I was running through the snow with his blood still wet on my hands, placed there by someone who wanted me to hang for a crime I did not commit. I brought my own fragments to our secret meetings, my mother's journals, hidden in a chest I had not opened since childhood. The lock rusted from years of deliberate neglect. Most entries were mundane, records of court life and seasonal celebrations and the small joys of raising a daughter she adored. But in the final pages, her handwriting grew erratic, the letters slanting wildly as though written by a hand that trembled with terror. "They watch me now," she wrote. "Varen's eyes follow me through every corridor like a wolf stalking wounded prey. He knows I found the documents Brennan hid before his death. They will silence me as they silenced him. I feel the shadow closing in. Protect yourself. My little one, trust no one with amber eyes who does not know our song." I read the words to Ronan by moonlight, and we both fell silent for a long time. "She knew," I whispered at last. "She knew about the song. She knew about you, somehow, even though you were just a child in the mountains." Ronan took my hand, and the warmth of his touch steadied something that had been trembling inside me for 17 years. "Our mothers must have known each other," he said. "Or perhaps the song is older than both of them. A bond passed down through generations of wolves, waiting for the right souls to find each other across whatever distance fate placed between them. But why? Why would anyone work so hard to keep us apart? Because we are stronger together. Because whoever killed Brennan and your mother knew that someday we would meet, and someday we would uncover what they buried beneath layers of lies and blood. The investigation consumed us both in the weeks that followed. We found witnesses who had been paid to lie and threatened into decades of silence. We uncovered records of bribes and falsified testimonies hidden in cellar archives no one had touched in years. And we found, buried beneath dust and deliberate misdirection, a letter from Brennan to my mother, dated 3 days before his murder. "Isolde," the letter read, "I have confirmed our worst suspicions. Varen is moving against the crown itself. He has secured secret alliances with the Eastern Lords and plans to challenge the Queen's authority before the year ends. We must act now, before he consolidates any more power. Meet me tomorrow at midnight by the Silver Stream. Bring everything you have gathered. Together we will expose him and end this threat forever." They had been allies, my mother and Brennan, united against a threat that neither of them survived. I looked at Ronan across the faded parchment, and I saw my own fury reflected in his amber eyes. "They killed them both," I said, my voice shaking with rage I had suppressed for 17 years. "Varen murdered them to protect his ambitions and his secrets, and he framed me to ensure the truth stayed buried forever. A 17-year-old orphan with no family to defend him, no allies to speak for him. The perfect sacrifice. The mate bond hummed between us like a living thing, no longer a source of confusion, but a wellspring of strength neither of us had ever known. I had spent my reign afraid, uncertain, doubting my right to lead a kingdom that saw me as nothing more than a placeholder until a suitable king could be found. But standing beside Ronan, I felt my wolf's power awakening at last, the authority I had always possessed finally unleashed. We would expose Varen, we would clear Ronan's name, and we would do it together, as the fates had always intended. The confrontation came on the night of the winter moon, in the great hall before the assembled council and every noble family in the kingdom. I had summoned them for a feast, let them believe their fragile queen was finally accepting her place as a figurehead who would soon need a husband to rule in her stead. But when they gathered in their finest furs and jewels, I stood before them with Ronan at my side, and the evidence of 20 years of treachery spread across the table between us. Varen's face went pale as bone, then flushed red with fury, then pale again as understanding dawned. He tried to speak, to deny, to redirect blame onto anyone within reach, but the evidence was overwhelming. Witness after witness came forward, freed at last from their fear by the promise of royal protection. Documents bore his seal, his handwriting, his unmistakable signature on orders that condemned innocent wolves to death and exile. In the end, it was not the council who condemned him. It was his own allies, scrambling desperately to distance themselves from a sinking vessel before it dragged them down into the depths. They turned on him with the same viciousness they had once directed at me, and I watched without pleasure as the architect of so much suffering was dragged from the hall in chains, screaming protests that no one believed anymore. Ronan stood beside me through it all, his hand warm and steady against the small of my back. When the doors closed behind Varen's guards, he leaned close and pressed his lips to my temple in a gesture so tender it nearly broke me. "It is done," he murmured against my skin. 20 years of exile and silence, and it is finally done. But it was not done. It was only beginning. The kingdom that had doubted me watched in stunned silence as I formally pardoned Ronan before the entire court, proclaimed his innocence in a voice that rang through the great hall like a bell, and restored his name and honor to the records that had tried to erase him. They watched as I took his scarred hand in mine and declared what my wolf had known from the first moment in that moonlit clearing by the stream. "He is my mate," I announced, and my voice did not waver. The fates themselves have bound us together across 20 years of separation, and I will not deny what the spirits have ordained. Any wolf who challenges this bond challenges me and the throne I hold. No one challenged. Perhaps they feared me at last. Perhaps they simply recognized the truth when it stood before them. Two wolves whose souls had been reaching for each other across decades of enforced distance. That night, Ronan and I walked together through the forest where we had first met. His white wolf padded beside us, ancient scars silver in the moonlight, finally at peace now that his human half had found the home he had been denied for so long. "The song," I said softly as we reached the clearing by the stream. "I still do not understand how we both know it. I still do not understand what it means." Ronan smiled, and for the first time since I had known him, I saw no shadows haunting his expression. Only peace. Only love. "Perhaps we never will understand," he admitted. "Perhaps some mysteries are meant to remain mysteries. Perhaps it is enough to know that the song led us to each other when everything else tried to keep us apart. That even when our memories were stolen and our futures were written by other hands, the melody remained, waiting for us to find each other again." I leaned into his warmth, and my wolf settled contentedly against his, two halves of a whole that had finally been made complete. My mother's lullaby hummed through my memory, no longer a source of grief, but a bridge between past and present, between loss and love, between the child I had been and the queen I had become. "Sing it with me," I whispered, and there in the forest, beneath a sky scattered with more stars than I had ever seen, we lifted our voices together. The melody wove between us, ancient and new, a promise that would carry us forward through whatever challenges still awaited. I had been a widow queen, lonely and doubted and afraid. Now I was something else entirely. Something stronger, something whole. I was Seraphine, mate to the Alpha I had always been destined to find, and our song would echo through the kingdom for generations to come.